The honourable member for St. John's South, Mount Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 15 years ago, in 1997, three respected Canadian university scientists wrote a paper with a fascinating title, and the title was this: Is scientific inquiry incompatible with government information control? In other words, if that wasn't put simply enough, can science coexist with government manipulation? That's a very good question. Here's a line from that 1997 controversial report. Quote, "Scientists were also explicitly ordered, as they are today, not to discuss politically sensitive matters with the public, irrespective of the scientific basis and publication status of the scientists' concerns." Mr. Speaker, I ask you, does that sound like scientists have been muzzled? Because it does to me. Let me read from the summary of that 1997 report, because that 1997 report is as relevant today as it was then. Quote, "There is a clear and immediate need for Canadians to examine very seriously the role of bureaucrats and politicians in the management of Canada's natural resources. The present framework of government departments such as DFO is based on the belief that the conservation of natural resources is best ensured by science integrated within a political body. Recent history would suggest otherwise." End of quote. The recent history that would suggest otherwise, Mr. Speaker, was the fall of the fisheries. Scientists were just a little bit off when they missed the collapse of what was once the world's biggest fish resource, the biggest fish resource on planet Earth, northern cod and the Grand Banks of Newfoundland. The trouble with science in Canada, fish science, for example, Mr. Speaker, is that it's tainted by politics. Science is manipulated and massaged by politicians and bureaucrats to meet their own ends, their own objectives. That's the way it works. The short answer is no, Mr. Speaker. Scientific inquiry is not compatible with government information control, key word being control. I have seen too many examples over my time as a journalist and an editor and my short time as a member of Parliament. As for the motion we're debating here today, calling on the government to end its muzzling of scientists, the Conservative government will say that scientists are not being muzzled, that science isn't being manipulated. That's not the case. Back in December, on the floor of the House of Commons, right here during question period, the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans was questioned about how scientists were reportedly afraid to go public with concerns about cuts to fisheries and oceans. In response, the minister asked a question. He asked this: "Do I look like a bully?" I was next to speak, Mr. Speaker, and I answered the minister's question. I said the minister did indeed look like a bully, although I later apologized, and it was a sincere apology. But I answered his question. The minister does not look like a bully. He looks like a stereotypical Canadian grandfather. That's not how government scientists are bullied. Not directly by ministers. It doesn't work that way, Mr. Speaker. It's not in-your-face bullying. It's not blatant muzzling. It's a lot more subtle than that. On that particular day in December, when the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans asked whether he looked like a bully, he was responding to questions about how employees fared that could face sanctions or suspensions for remarks on federal job losses within the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans. According to their union, scientists were worried about cuts to fisheries and oceans, but wouldn't speak for fear of being blacklisted. As with all cuts, the Conservative government said there would be no negative impact on research. But what else are they going to say? The scientists say otherwise. Or they would if they weren't going to be blacklisted, quote, for the rest of their lives. The media policy in place at Fisheries and Oceans is similar to what has been implemented at Environment Canada. Scientists there cannot speak to reporters even about their own research until it's cleared through a network of public relations and even the Prime Minister's office. Fisheries and Oceans scientist Christy Miller was recently told not to give interviews about her research on the causes of the sockeye salmon decline on BC's Salmon River Fraser River, I should say, even though her research had been published in Nature. Scott Gallimore, another example, a natural resources geoscientist who had an article published in Nature about a flood 13,000 years ago in northern Canada, was denied the right to speak to the media until after the media's deadline had elapsed. Mr. Speaker, this is frequently how muzzling occurs. Mr. Speaker, I was a journalist for 20 years. I was a reporter, and I was a persistent one. I was like a dog with a bone. Early in my career, I'd be allowed to sit down with a scientist one-on-one. No problem. That's the way it worked. By the end of my career, I wasn't allowed to sit down with a scientist, even with a public relations official at their side. I had to submit questions in advance, in writing, and get an official, formal response. Are scientists being muzzled? Take it to the bank, Mr. Speaker. The prestigious British journal Nature has written 2 editorials in the last 2 years calling on, quote, the Canadian government to set its scientists free. The truth will set us free, Mr. Speaker. The truth, not as the Conservatives see it, but as it is. Pure, untainted truth. The Conservatives are taking the art of muzzling to another level, Mr. Speaker. The ultimate muzzling is to eliminate the person being muzzled altogether, to eliminate the position, to eliminate search and data gathering programs. If, under the Liberals, we had the decade of darkness, under the Conservatives, we have entered another period of dark ages, the darkest of ages, Mr. Speaker, the con age. Connage is a new word according to the Urban Dictionary. It means complete and utterly, it means completely and utterly owned. The Conservative government is attempting to eliminate all opposition and all opposing opinion by eliminating the information at the source. Welcome to the con age, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative government's Trojan horse budget makes sweeping cuts to departments, agencies, and organizations that engage in research and data collection, meaning scientific research is being increasingly corralled into demand-driven funding models to service profit-driven demands from big industry. Big industry, Mr. Speaker, which is who this Conservative government caters to. Budget 2012 eliminates the National Roundtable on the Environment and the Economy. By year's end, funding will be cut to a team of 7 smokestack air pollution specialists who crack down on toxic pollution that kills more than 21,000 Canadians a year. Environment Canada will lose 20% of a budget of a key program that checks to see whether the mining industry meets emission standards. The unit of Environment Canada that responds to oil spill emergencies will be dramatically scaled back, and most regional offices will be closed. The list goes on and on. The Conservatives will say that they don't see a trend, but that's because their heads are stuck in the con age. The last thing I want to touch on, Mr. Speaker, is the elimination of the National Council on Welfare, created in 1962 to provide research on poverty in Canada. The Council on Welfare has been described by former director as a friend to the opposition and a royal pain in the butt to a party once it takes government. No wonder it's been eliminated, Mr. Speaker. I've been wearing a wristband since before the federal election. I haven't taken it off, Mr. Speaker. The wristband says, make poverty history. Before I make each and every decision as a politician, I ask how this decision will impact the Canadian poor. The Conservative government should ask itself the same question with respect to the elimination of the National Council on Welfare. It will not help Canadians, Mr. Speaker. It will make their plight that much harder. Mr. Speaker, this past weekend, I held a town hall in my riding to discuss the Conservative Trojan horse budget. One of the speakers was Chris Hogan, Executive Director of the Newfoundland and Labrador Environmental Network. Chris said something about this Conservative government's gutting of environmental legislation and cuts in general that has stuck with me. He said this: less science equals less knowledge. It's basically like driving with the lights off. Mr. Speaker, this Conservative government is at the wheel of this country, and it's driving full speed with the lights off. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, this Conservative government is eliminating the police, so there's less of a chance, there's no chance they'll be pulled over. This Conservative government is an accident waiting to happen. Make no mistake, Mr. Speaker, there will be a public roadblock in 2015, and this Conservative government will be forced off the road, and the carnage will come to a dead stop. Thank you, Mr.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On May 15th, I was on a panel on Power Play where the host asked the NDP environment critic, give me something that the National Roundtable on the Environment, you feel advocated not a carbon tax, but something that was useful and perhaps the government should have paid attention to. So he was asking the environment critic to name a report that she used, and she responded, pulling off the top of my head like that, I'm not sure. So I'd like to ask my colleague opposite which report he would point to.
The Honourable Member for St. John's South, Mount Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for the question. I'm not going to speak for the New Democrat critic for the environment. She can speak for herself. But I will say this, if there's one quick thing that I could say to the member opposite, to this government opposite, is that there has to be balance. There has to be balance in life, there has to be balance in politics, there has to be a balance in this country between industrial development and the environment. And this Conservative government, take this with you, the Honourable Member opposite, this Conservative government has lost that balance.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Vancouver Centre.
Speaker, I note that the Honourable Member talked about science and about some of the cuts that were made, and he also mentioned 10 years of darkness under the Liberal government. I would like to inform him that Technology Partnerships Canada and all of the research that moved us from number 7 in the G8 to number 1 in the G8 came in under 10 years of a Liberal government, in which $10 billion was spent just on a Foundation for Innovation alone. Anyway, I wanted to ask the Honourable Member a pertinent question. We notice cuts in the water and air quality analysis that's going on. And I'm speaking as a physician. My concern is that when you cut all these scientists who are monitoring water and air quality, what is going to happen to the safety of the water we drink? How is this going to impact on the health of Canadians across this country and the diseases they will get from drinking non-potable water?
Honourable Member for St. John's South, Mount Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Liberal Member for the question. If you make cuts to science in any area, be it in research for air, research for water, research for fish, research for mining, research for oil and gas development, if you cut the basic research, the point was made here earlier that science is another word for research. If you cut the basic research, if you cut the basic knowledge, the environment will suffer, and we as a people, we as Canadians will suffer in the end. Our knowledge base won't be there, and mistakes will happen. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Parkdale, High Park.
Colleague from St. John's South, Mount Pearl, for his excellent speech, and I thought his analogy of the Conservative government's willful dismissal of scientists and scientific information and data is appropriately like a car driving full steam ahead with their eyes closed in the dark. But it also seems they don't even want to look in the rearview mirror, because there are massive cuts to libraries and archives. More than 20% of the workforce will be eliminated. The government said it's just getting rid of duplication, modernizing, but apparently only 2% of our archives are digitized, which means that Canadians will lose their history. Can the member comment about the loss of this important Canadian information?
Member for St. John's South, Mount Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Member for Parkdale, Hyde Park, for the question. A very good question. And I like how you took my analogy one step further. The Conservatives are like a government that's driving a car without the lights on, and they're not looking in the rearview mirror. You're absolutely right. In the case of libraries, for example, with the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans, which had 11 libraries across the country, that's being cut to 7. And are most of those libraries digitized? The answer is no, they're not. So what's going to happen with the information in those libraries? It will be lost. What will that mean? That will mean we won't learn by past mistakes. How big have our mistakes been made in the past by consecutive Liberal and Conservative governments? Huge. Huge environmental mistakes. Again, I'm a member for Newfoundland. That takes in the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, utterly destroyed. Huge mistakes. And we're destroying the libraries. That makes no sense.
Resuming debate, the